WEFUNK. We funk.
Like I said before, we cut into the closer look. This was a cult classic phenomenon, and kind of wants us to take wanted to take a closer look at another cult classic that might not have been the biggest movie that came out, but just have a cult phenomenon around them that people know these movies up and down.
Yes.
But to kick things off, personally, like when I think of like a cult classic movie that like there's just a group of people that know this movie from start to finish, and I would think of Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Of course. The Room, definitely one of the all-time cult classics, really in recent years, like immortalized by, who was it?
The James Franco movie.
Franco, yes, exactly. James Franco made the movie in Dolomite fashion, the movie about the movie. But for years before, that was like the super inside, kind of intentionally bad, like one of the world's worst movies that everybody just loved because of that fact.
For sure. Yeah, the people are just like upset. And people that have seen it, like it's like a special little club. Like,
exactly.
Have, like,
I'll basically just give you the other side of that, where The Room was always like the other version of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is, of course, like that's pretty much the predominant, cult classic. There was always like the other one, like the hip, cool one that people didn't know was The Room, and that was like the exact same thing. Literally in New York City, there's two theaters that every midnight, one theater shows the Rocky Horror. There's still one that every midnight shows The Room every week. You know what I mean? So
for sure, and just like Rocky Horror, too, like, people go to the theaters and, like, say the lines with the movie. I know, like, Rocky Horror, people get up on, like, in front of the screen and act it out. I know, in, like, The Room, people, like, throw footballs around.
Yeah.
And,
both is the same thing. It's very interactive. Whole shenanigans. The Rocky Horror Picture is far better. I've seen them both. The whole Room thing is like, really bad. Rocky Horror Picture is a really good movie and all, and it just kind of like lends itself to the singing and all of the lines just with the movie, but it's not like an unintentionally funny movie like The Room. It's just, has the cult classic for the sci-fi angle and the kind of,
For sure. I would say on... I guess one that was our closer look for Marriage Story with best breakup films, but also another like cult classic. I would say Swingers. Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn is a big like indie film that has like a huge cult following.
For sure. I guess kind of just in the 90s, if you want to go cult films, indie. I guess in the 90s, it's really just like those indie directors kind of have a little bit of a cult feel, because Tarantino definitely has like, especially like the midnight shows of Pulp Fiction are a huge thing. And
Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs as well, of course, is another,
You could even say in Tarantino-esque True Romance.
Yes, for
written
sure.
Movie of his, but like it's a huge cult classic.
For sure. But Pulp Fiction is definitely like in a every midnight theater rotation. That's like an all-time classic,
Big time. I would say even in that same Tarantino-esque, and like you were saying, 90s kind of like indie films, but a lot of the early Kevin Smith films, like Clerk, Chasing Amy, Mallrats, his first three are like big. Cult classics before they were like big budget.
Yeah, for sure. Clerks especially still gets a lot of play, on that cult circuit, black and white and all, and like the very young, fresh-faced, famous people, years down the road. So that's a real cool one. But really, when you think cult classics, though, I think from the a vintage of the Dolomite, and like we said, Rocky Horror. And I really felt for me watching Dolomite, and it's another one actually that I brought up, I think, in one of the recent episodes, but I guess maybe last week with the best Boston movies. But it's definitely this movie, the Dolomite is definitely like, if you're looking for the white version of Dolomite, it would definitely be the John Waters catalog from like Pink Flamingos and Female Troubles, especially.
For sure,
but
man.
Totally antisocial content, like beyond crazy, over the top antisocial, content, and as well just extremely shabbily done. Like, it's an indie movie to the point that me and you can make it, especially like now in the 2000s watching these movies, but all from the early 70s. But like even by then they had like the Lou Reed feel of, we can very well create this ourselves. It's like the Jackass boys.
Absolutely.
But Dolomite, like, just, to even further on that, but of course those movies star the character Divine, which is like, a trans, like a transsexual or whatever, but it's like a very, notable individual character, much like Rudy Ray Moore and Dolomite, that would then go on to star in lots of different movies, all kind of based on the one, like, persona of Divine, So it's a very similar kind of thing,
Dude, for sure. I'll even kind of flip it around and kind of say one that, like, you wouldn't think, but you think of it now and you're like, oh, that was like a big box office movie. Everyone knows and loves that movie. But when Scarface first came out, it was a theater bomb. Like, it ate shit. And it wasn't until, like, people started talking about that movie afterwards. They're like, you've got to see this crazy, like, cokehead, hilarious Al Pacino doing a Cuban accent.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one that, like, benefits. I'm sorry, what was that?
I said it definitely started off as a cult film.
Okay, interesting. Because, yeah, that definitely benefits from, like, 90s rappers giving it a second birth, you know what I mean? Where, like, me and you only know that movie because it was on, like, every single rapper's wall in Cribs, Like, remember Cribs? Every rapper had to go through their, like, Scarface fucking, huge shrine. And I was like, all right, I gotta check out this Scarface. All right, I gotta start doing some of this cocaine. Like, Jesus.
I think that even goes back to us, one of our earlier Game Time Hollywood go-to guys, was I think Al Pacino and Scarface won it out just because of many Scarface posters in kids' like college dorms and rap videos.
For real.
Like,
I guess for another more contemporary one, I'd say perhaps since Rocky Horror and The Room, but all-time cult film from more recent years, but Big Lebowski. So cult that it even has its own traveling festival, which unfortunately due to coronavirus, I believe, has been canceled this year, or not taking place. But a couple years ago...
Nothing sacred, coronavirus.
Yeah. A couple years ago, I went to the Big Lebowski Fest bowling night, and they hold... now it was actually spread to New York, I guess. It would take place every year in Louisville. It's like a designated like home base, and then I caught the New York version out. It was like spreading, they were like rolling out additional dates and stuff. But Big Lebowski, of course, you can buy like the whole wardrobe online, the whole White Russians. Like it's just become such a thing. And as well, when it came out, it was definitely not a huge smash,
No, for sure. I guess another movie like that, you can kind of say, because again, like Lebowski is like it was like a high theater release, but it definitely has a cult following. But what was I gonna say? Oh, Spinal Tap. I guess you could say Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap is a big cult following of just like being one of the first mockumentary series that whenever you talk about that, people will always go back to this is Spinal Tap.
100%. That one as well has the great cult additive of you can literally go see him live or like play the if you don't feel like laughing along to the movie, you can go play the album and like wonder if it's a joke or not because but that actually makes a huge difference when there's like, and again it kind of like, I mean the whole thing was like I guess crossing the line, in that the point of that movie, but like that album is literally, not only does it give them like they literally went on tour and all that kind of stuff and adds like a whole nother element of fandom. But as well, it does have the great like quotability. If you ever go see a Spinal Tap show, definite lots of moments where, this one goes to the 11, and the whole place goes nuts. There's like specific moments that everybody looks forward to and whatnot. Of course, anytime they play Stonehenge, I lose my mind. And Stonehenge is definitely what you're supposed to yell these days instead of yelling Freebird. when a band's looking for a song request, always go Stonehenge. That's my pro tip anyway.
That's a great one. One more that I have, and this one's just a personal one to the Geeked Up boys and Mike the Accountant, fan of the show and guest. But I'm going to go In the Soup, 1992 film starring Steve Buscemi.
Oh, nice. There we go.
A real special place in the Geeked Up boys' heart. Lost footage movie. Actually won the Cannes in 92.
Yes.
We got to see it at the Tribeca Film Festival.
Yeah. It was like, I guess to explain, it was like a 30th anniversary of the film or not, but it was a Steve Buscemi produced, created whole project from the early 90s that I think like the footage got like burned or some shit, right? And then it was actually restored. That was why that was the honor of what we were seeing.
Was lost or burned.
Yeah, it wasn't even like they couldn't shop it or whatever. It was like, because back then it was actually like on film, not, there was no, they didn't have it backdated in the cloud back then. You know what I mean? So it was like literally the film got damaged, and instead of refurbishing it at the time, Steve Buscemi just like moved on to, he made Reservoir Dogs actually, I think, literally. Because I think they talked about how in that film festival process, like he was up for like Reservoir Dogs was in the same indie film circuit as In the Soup, and they were like competing against each other.
Yeah, they were both like, I think Reservoir Dogs won like the Fan Award, and I think In the Soup won the Critic Award for the Cannes or Cannes, however you say it.
Exactly. So Buscemi kind of went on to a great acting career, didn't really worry about getting the whole, thing refurbished and whatnot until years later when he was successful. They dug it up and re-released it. I think you can now find it, definitely I'd say you'd be able to stream it now. Super cool 90s indie film to the absolute max. Who was the guy? Tom Cazale or whatever the other great, guy starred. It was a great role.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Seymour Castle,
exactly. But a great film to check out there. And a real, too cool for the room. You can join the Geeked Up boys looking down your nose at the rest of the world.
WEFUNK. We funk.